This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Elisa. Again, my name is Haven Colgate. I'm on the NISAC Board of Directors. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Alison Gregory. She is the founder and CEO and president of AreaHub. She's going to tell you about this novel and new way that we can all aggregate better environmental information for our communities. Take it away, Alison.
Thank you so much, Haven. It's a pleasure to be here. And I, like many of you, am a person who really appreciates nature. I grew up on a farm along a river, and I'm thrilled to be here. I also want to say that I respect your commitment to your towns and the impact of your work on the present and future well-being of your areas. To kick it off, I wanted to just start talking about how roughly a year ago, one of the UN IPCC reports warned of changes in the intensity and frequency of climate extremes. On the East Coast, it predicted increases in extreme precipitation and flash and riverine flooding. And across the world, it predicted increasing heat waves, longer warm seasons, and shorter cold seasons. In fact, in 2021 alone, NOAA reported that damages from natural disasters totaled about $145 billion in the US. We are already seeing several of these significant events in our news feeds, on our televisions, and sometimes in our own experiences. As we all know, just last week, Hurricane Ian slammed into Southwest Florida and decimated some areas in its path. And in our New York areas, we may not be currently facing such catastrophic events frequently, but credible models have predicted that these changes are likely to affect all of us one way or another. Here in New York, for example, some areas have been grappling with droughts and flooding, and we have concerns about changes such as deforestation or other things. But even with this unfolding picture, we can find some good news. There are efforts already underway that can make a difference, and we can find examples far away or here in New York. This conference is proof of that. Further away and down under, to take one example, Australia recently announced an effort to conserve and slow biodiversity loss. Its government pledged millions to protect its most threatened plants, native plants and animals, and conserve 30% of its landmass. In doing so, it was joining a number of other countries that have made similar pledges. Here in New York, our conservation and environmental groups are pursuing a range of efforts that many of you are involved in, including efforts to reduce pesticide and fertilizer use, to reduce plastic and other waste, to establish pollinator pathways, pursue ambitious townwide emission reduction goals, or to adopt environmental conservation master plans. These are just a few of many initiatives that are being pursued, as you all well know. And you're doing so while also seeking to raise residents' awareness of these issues and to encourage their participation in these efforts. Unfortunately, the challenges sometimes can feel greater or faster than the strides we are making, especially when extreme weather events and changes are sometimes occurring faster than prior models may have predicted. These occurrences can affect the bottom line for individuals, for businesses, for towns, and for governments. For example, a recent study of Standard & Poor's stated that over 90% of the world's largest companies will have at least one asset financially exposed to climate risks, such as wildfires or floods, by the 2050s. And more than a third of those companies will see at least one asset lose 20% or more of its value as the planet heats up. Excuse me. Moreover, the interconnectedness of many of these issues in our environment has never been more evident than we are starting to see today. So extreme weather events and natural hazards are occasionally causing damage to various hazards in our communities, which can threaten lives and have lingering effects on our communities. For example, the risk of industrial hazards like Superfunds, brownfields, or other contaminated sites can be exacerbated when a disaster strikes, hurricane, flooding, or the like, because it can increase the likelihood of a spill or other incidents. In New York, we have 86 Superfund sites across the state registered by the EPA. Extreme weather events can impact or disperse contaminants, potentially from these sites or other facilities that involve toxic materials, especially as flooding and heat waves become increasingly common in the state. And when our local areas experience flooding, these waters may pick up and disperse pollutants from contaminated sites or from sewage systems and send these into rivers, streams, or other water bodies. By polluting our natural waters, our natural environments, and sometimes our water supplies can be adversely affected. This can not only affect our daily lives and our agriculture, but also affect or threaten the health of plants and animals that depend on these habitats. The reality of these issues is a world with intensifying climate hazards and increasing environmental risks, which can at times feel overwhelming, confusing, and hard to understand for some of us. That's why we created AreaHub. We wanted to create a one-stop climate and environmental platform to empower wiser decision-making and reveal a more holistic picture of an area's environmental health. By way of background, years ago, I had spent hours online trying to access information about the environmental health of my local New York area. As a mom, as a homeowner, and as someone who's always appreciated and been interested in the environment, I wanted to understand the risks in my local area and what I could do about it. When I found how challenging it was to find accessible climate and environmental information, I spoke with a few friends and immediately realized the need for clear and easy to understand local environmental information, especially in today's world. So we created AreaHub, a one-stop nationwide environmental platform built on transparency and science-based information to help individuals, conservation and environmental leaders, municipalities, and businesses better understand the hazards and risks in their surroundings. AreaHub aggregates data from multiple third-party sources, including a number of federal government agencies, to provide clear, local climate and environmental information in easy searches on up to 30 topics. But you might be wondering, how can this help you? AreaHub's high-level local data and reporting can aid your guidance and decision-making on significant environmental issues and climate risks, all in one place. For example, when identifying important considerations from an urban planning, risk, and/or mitigation perspective, you might want to understand the area's aggregate pollution picture, with air quality, with radon, with Superfund or brownfield contaminated sites, with the toxic release inventory facilities, etc. And seeing this more holistic picture of an area's extreme weather patterns could also help prioritization and project-related decisions, such as resilience and equity mapping initiatives, new potential location assessments, adaptation planning, etc. We want to help you not only see the picture, but also identify trends for natural phenomena occurring in your area, maybe whether floods are increasing in intensity, whether they seem to be in an increasing pattern or one-off situations. Those things can help you assess the likelihood of an issue arising from flooding as you start to make decisions about an area, for example. Fast Company wrote that we provide a tool for what nature might throw at you, whether for proposals, reviews, planning, risk mitigation, or other things. We want to help provide you some of the information that might be useful to you as you try to serve your local communities. We also understand that some people may want to just access the limited information available in the free version, or you may want to subscribe for more information to unlock more of what we've gathered. Either way, we want to help provide a clearer picture, an easy picture, and a fast picture of what are the types of questions you may have as you're trying to serve your communities in these ways. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I'll be walking around the community afterwards if anyone would like to approach me with questions.
Thanks so much, Alison. I am putting your AreaHub website in the chat so everyone can kind of kick the tires and see what sorts of information are available on the website. It's a great visual picture that you're going to see very clearly. Did you want to take any questions? You have another 3 minutes until the next presentation, if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, we can get on to the next presentation and people can ask questions at the end. Your choice.
I think given how you want to fit in 3 speakers in this hour, I might want to preserve the questions so that I can actually address them one-on-one and be able to give them more time. But thank you for the offer.
Sure. So Brittany Carbone is our next presenter. She works for the Cannabis oh gosh, Association of New York, correct? See, I know it is CANY. Their mission is, and she'll tell you all about it, is to make sure that this new and burgeoning industry is sustainably managed. And I'll let Brittany take it away.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for having me. It's really a pleasure to be able to speak in front of this group. It's really important to educate, especially people who are leaders in environmental conservation in terms of local and municipal and city level work, because that is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of the cannabis industry and how it is really developed. There's a lot that can be done through policy and through regulation and through legislation, of course, but it's really comes down to how the local municipalities choose to govern cannabis businesses in their areas. And it's really required to have a real kind of 360 understanding of the impacts and implications of a new and emerging cannabis industry, and kind of debunking a lot of the common misconceptions around cannabis and sustainability, but more importantly, providing best practices and solutions to ensure that the proper protections are being put in place to guarantee that cannabis businesses are operating in a way that really prioritizes environmental consciousness, sustainability, and resource preservation. So as I said, Brittany Carbone, I'm on the board of directors of the Cannabis Association of New York. We're the largest cannabis trade association in the state. We have over 500 members. We've grown a lot over the past couple of years, of course, as the cannabis industry has been developing more and more. We started off really focused on the hemp industry, and now have, of course, made that transition and expanded into the adult use cannabis space as well. So I am also chair of the association sustainability committee. And I also bring the perspective of not only a cannabis operator who has been active in the New York hemp industry since 2017, but a small organic farmer who was awarded an adult use conditional cultivation license in April, and in the process of harvesting some of New York's first adult use cannabis crop after 4 years of cultivating certified organic hemp, using sustainable and regenerative practices on our family farm in Berkshire, New York. So the Sustainability Committee was formed with the purpose of building environmental sustainability into the foundational framework of New York's cannabis policy and operational infrastructure. By providing a set of standards that prioritizes, facilitates, and incentivizes the adoption of sustainable practices at every stage of the supply chain, we can ensure the long-term viability of a resource-intensive industry and actually improve New York's progress towards achieving the goals set out in the state's 2019 climate bill. CANY's Sustainability Committee serves to inform and shape policy that aligns stakeholder interest with environmental consciousness in order to build a future-focused industry that encourages innovation, revitalizes New York's farming communities, and prioritizes the benefit of both people and planet. Our work has included developing the environmental sustainability program that mandated through the conditional bill, advocating for comprehensive reporting on resource usage, the implementation of best practices established and validated by mature markets, and labeling requirements that make it easy for consumers to identify and support sustainable brands and operators. We also support a lot of the legislative bills that have been introduced to address cannabis and sustainability, including the bill put forth last year by Donna Lupardo to classify cannabis as an agricultural crop in order to prevent farmers transitioning to cannabis from losing their agricultural tax assessments, and ensure that cannabis farmers are eligible for state-funded programs that support and incentivize sustainable development on agricultural land. We've also been in communication with legislators to help shape the language in key cannabis sustainability bills, such as the hemp packaging bill, grower efficiency bill, and recycling bill. All of these bills serve really important purposes, especially the grower efficiency bill, when we talk about how this affects the cannabis businesses that may be popping up in your local region. The grower efficiency bill really sets out very stringent standards in terms of how cannabis needs to be produced, from lighting efficiency to water tracking and usage to air quality. All of these things are very tightly being regulated to ensure that again, we're following the goals and the examples set out in the 2019 climate bill, and actually utilizing the cannabis industry and this new and emerging market to reach those goals. So right now, we are in a position to really be able to shape what these regulations look like. The draft regulations for the New York's adult use cannabis market is probably going to come out within the next month or so. And then there is a comment period where we have the opportunity to express our feedback to the points raised in those draft regulations, and that becomes a really important opportunity to take the work that we've been doing, the conversations we've been having with both the regulators like the OCM and the CCB, Cannabis Control Board, and the Office of Cannabis Management, as well as legislators who have been really supportive of these efforts, such as Donna Lepardo and Michelle Hinchey, and really make sure that these things are being taken into consideration in the regulations. And if they are not, using this opportunity to provide our feedback with really a lot of data and a lot of evidence-backed arguments that are gained from the insights that can be gathered from mature markets and data that they've been collecting already. So really, we performed in-depth analyses of sustainable packaging options, their viability, recycling and reuse programs, and have really been looking at this from a very holistic approach in terms of sustainability, which is really important because, as a lot of us know, there's a lot of greenwashing that occurs in a lot of industries. Say that it's organic, say it's sustainable, but there's really, just because it's in a glass jar instead of a plastic jar, what are actually the practices that are going into producing this product? Is that sustainable, right? How much plastic waste is being used in the cultivation process, from trellis to track and trace tags and all these things, how much energy is being used, how much water is being used. All of these things really add up to a more holistic view of the sustainability and efficiency of any given cannabis operation. So what we advocate for, and what we've had really great traction in advocating for, has been a reporting system that pretty much grades operators based on a lot of these metrics, right? That takes all of these different factors of your business into account and is able to provide a score, right? To be able to grade operators and establish a baseline and benchmarks to say, above this score, you qualify as efficient, sustainable, eco-friendly, whatever you want to call it. But then below that score, you have some work to do, and these are the corrective actions that you can take to reach those goals. And that becomes an iterative process that we can enter into with the regulators to help inform and shape policy going forward, and make sure that we are adapting to the needs of the industry, and also the infrastructure that supports it. One of the biggest issues that we've ran into is, in terms of packaging, is as much as we would love to eliminate single-use plastics and really rely more so on post-consumer recycled plastics, if any, the reality is that it's not really widely available and accessible, and can end up creating more financial barriers for social equity businesses and small and medium-sized businesses. So it's really about taking these incremental steps towards the progress and the goals that we want to reach, and seeing how we can take each step towards these larger end goals that we want to reach. And when we talk about cannabis, it would be remiss to not mention industrial hemp, and the way that industrial hemp can really improve sustainable development and serve as a replacement for a lot of the materials that we currently use. And again, the big problem that we run into is the infrastructure for processing industrial hemp. So, looking to utilize tax revenues and funding opportunities through legislation such as the hemp packaging bill to be able to fund projects that are focusing on the research and development to improve this infrastructure, and to help manufacturers get on board with producing more sustainable hemp-based packaging materials for use within the cannabis industry. And then, of course, that has implications in all industries going forward from there, right? So it's really, looking at this plant as what it can do for people, for communities, not just through, the plant itself and the medicine that it can provide, right? But by the fact that this is a new industry that people are knocking down the door to get into right now, right? There's a lot of larger companies that want to enter New York and see it as an opportunity. It's going to be one of the largest markets, if not the largest market for cannabis in the country. So there are going to be larger companies who are very much incentivized to come into New York. And what we want to really see is the state holding those larger operators and out-of-state operators accountable for the carbon footprint that they would be, potentially, bringing into the state by, installing kind of carbon inset programs and, having these companies invest into funds that can then go towards supporting smaller operators in developing a more sustainable infrastructure and renewable energy on their own operations. So there's really, again, how it kind of really relates back to the local level is through things like zoning, right? We've seen already, efforts by certain towns in the state to limit where cannabis cultivation operations can be built, can take place, and creating these overlay districts. One of which was for the high energy usage overlay district that coupled cannabis cultivation with cryptocurrency mining. So that again is really a product of a gross misunderstanding of how efficiently cannabis can be cultivated with the right practices put in place, with the practices that are proposed in the grower efficiency bill, with the practices that have already been established through the guidance for the conditional cultivators, right? All of these things point to the fact that environmental sustainability is at the forefront of the Office of Cannabis Management's mind. And it's a matter of how do we communicate that with our town boards and our municipal officials to be able to really have more of an open and honest conversation about, okay, there are certain realities of grid capacity and these types of things, but, with, certain measures being taken into consideration with certain efficiency standards for HVAC and lighting, does that really even start to compare to the very great, resource intensive practice of cryptocurrency mining? Like, not even close, right? So what we were able to do was at the very least kind of step in and get that town to decouple cannabis cultivation and cryptocurrency mining. So time's up.
Well, I was giving you a 30-second grace
Okay.
period. That was awesome.
Yeah.
If y'all don't know, the possibilities of very devastating environmental impacts from the cannabis industry are very real. So we're very pleased to know that there are steps being taken by Canny and to sort of ensure that this industry starts off and stays on the right foot in terms of all of our sustainable goals in New York State. So that if anyone has any other questions, I think let's jump right now into our Dandelion presentation to make sure that we have time for that. And I'm putting the Canny website in the chat. So if you'd like to learn more about Canny and Brittany, there's also information on our sponsors page about all three of our sponsors. So I want to thank you very much, Brittany, for being with us. And I hope you'll stick around for Doug's discussion of geothermal HVAC systems for your fossil-free home in New York State. So Doug Nyman's from Dandelion Energy, and take it away, Doug.
Thanks, Haven. Good morning, everybody. My name is Doug Nyman. I'm an energy consultant at Dandelion Geothermal. I really appreciate your time today. I promise to make this as informative and short and sweet as possible. I do have a presentation here that I'd like to share with you. So I'm going to share my screen with you right now. So y'all could see my screen. So I want to start off by sharing a little bit about myself and my company's history very briefly, I promise, so that you know who you're doing business with, and you folks could feel comfortable engaging with Dandelion Geothermal to bring geothermal technology to your house. Talk a little bit about geothermal technology, how a heat pump works, how it can help reduce carbon emissions, and what Dandelion's process looks like as far as our whole business model of retrofitting geothermal systems to homes in New York State. I would encourage you to throw any questions that you might have in the chat, and then I'll try to leave some time at the end to answer those questions. I will tell you that if you have like pretty specific questions about your home specifically, I would encourage you to reach out to me directly, and we could see what we could do about setting up a consultation for you. I'll put my info in the chat once I'm done with this presentation, but I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can today. So Dandelion launched out of Google X in 2017. Google X is Google's self-proclaimed moonshot factory, where they've got some of the greatest minds in engineering and technology working to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. So my company's founder, her name is Kathy Hanoun. She started as a product manager at Google X. And during her time there, she learned that in the United States, buildings and homes account for almost 40% of all carbon emissions. And a majority of those emissions are actually coming from fossil fuel burning heating systems and inefficient cooling systems. And so Kathy started Dandelion because millions of homeowners in our country don't have any other options to heat and cool their home other than to use the dirty, expensive truck delivered fuels that came with the house that they purchased. Kathy is a pioneer in the HVAC industry. She's developed technology that allowed Dandelion to drill and install geothermal ground loops on the smallest of properties. She's developed processes and techniques that allow us to install geothermal heat pumps better, quicker, and cheaper than our competitors. And in 2017, when she spun out into her own private company, Google was Kathy's first major investor. That year, 2017, we installed about 40 homes in the Westchester area of New York State. Dandelion decided to use that as our headquarter and our first service territory, thanks mostly to the robust incentives that were available from the various utility providers in that area of the state. Since that time, we have expanded our territory pretty significantly. So we are now in all of New York State, including Long Island. We are in all of Connecticut. We are in Massachusetts, we're in Vermont, we're in New Jersey. We have over 1,000 homes installed to date. We have about 500 homes in various stages of our installation and operations pipeline. Dandelion Geothermal at this point is way more than a product. It is a movement, and the movement is growing strong. In fact, we recently secured a $30 million round of investments from Bill Gates and his investment arm at Breakthrough Energy Ventures, because Bill Gates believes in Dandelion's mission of delivering low-cost geothermal to homeowners. And so Dandelion's whole mission is to remove fossil fuels from the HVAC, from all residential HVAC systems in general. And the way that we're sort of accomplishing this low-cost geothermal installation is by essentially being a one-stop shop. So Dandelion provides a geothermal system design for each homeowner that we meet with upfront, no cost, no obligation, so that when these homeowners eventually sign their geothermal sales agreements, they know what the scope of work is, what it's going to cost them, and they understand how Dandelion landed on the system design that we landed on. We offer low interest financing options where folks can pay for the systems for $0 down and then pay for it over 10 or 20 years. Dandelion handles all the permitting for the project and all the pricing associated with that permitting. And then we're going to come to your house, and Dandelion is going to drill and install your ground loops. We're going to connect the ground loops to the home, and then we're going to remove all your old HVAC equipment while we're there. So as part of our standard scope of work, we get rid of your old outdoor compressor condenser for your central AC. We get rid of your old air handler. We remove your old furnace and boilers. We hook up the geothermal heat pumps to your pre-existing ductwork. And then we get your system up and running. We replace your thermostats with Ecobee smart thermostats. And then once your system is fully commissioned, Dandelion is going to provide all the guidance and the customer support that our customers need from an HVAC perspective. Our systems come with remote monitoring, free of charge for the entire lifespan of your system. And that monitoring really allows us to keep an eye on your system for you. I like to tell my customers, you won't call us, we'll call you if there's a performance issue with your heat pump. And in a lot of cases, we can remotely identify and fix the issue without even having to come out to your house. With all of that said, Dandelion Geothermal system doesn't require any maintenance contract. There's no need for any, annual tune-ups, annual cleanings, annual visits from an HVAC pro at all. The only maintenance required is for the homeowner to change the filter on their unit about 2 to 4 times a year. So folks come to Dandelion for a variety of reasons. These kind of seem to be like the 5 main buckets for why people seek Dandelion out, right? First and foremost, sustainability. By switching over from oil, propane, or natural gas heating over to geothermal heating and cooling, homeowners have an opportunity to reduce their own carbon output by up to 80% each year. I'm going to I have a different slide that I'm going to share in a moment that kind of highlights the actual environmental impact of geothermal. But at the end of the day, geothermal is the single most impactful thing that a homeowner can do in order to reduce their carbon footprint. When it comes to affordability, we offer $0 down installation, low interest financing options. And when it comes to your actual overhead, by switching from a fossil fuel heating system to geothermal heating, you're going to save, a couple of $1,000 a year on your heating bills. And in the summer, geothermal heat pump is about 200% more efficient than a brand new central AC. So your electric bills are going to be cut in half. When it comes to health and safety, from a health perspective, the air quality in your home with a geothermal system is going to be significantly healthier, thanks to the way these geothermal heat pumps are constantly circulating and conditioning the air through extremely powerful filters. And then from a safety perspective, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? You switch over to geothermal heat and you're able to stop lighting oil on fire in your basement for heat. Right? No more risk of carbon monoxide poisoning and no more carbon going right up your flue out into the atmosphere. And last but not least, geothermal is going to provide homeowners with the opportunity to get some energy independence. So by simply tapping into the earth, your yard is your primary source of heat for 100 years, which is how long those ground loops are going to last. The average geothermal heat pump itself lasts about 25 years, quarter of a century. And so our whole business model is designed in order to bring geothermal to the masses. And so really we have the ability to retrofit practically any home. And our whole system and our whole process is designed to accommodate every homeowner that's interested in installing geothermal. And so I want to dive in here and talk a little bit more detail about how geothermal works. How does it help reduce pollution? What is Dandelion's process exactly from beginning to end? And of course, talk a little bit about next steps. So I'm going to give you guys a really high-level overview of geothermal technology. Earth-powered heating and cooling. First, I want to say that a heat pump, in general, is simply a machine that uses the refrigeration cycle to transfer heat. They make it hot on one side and cold on the other. In the winter, you want the hot side in your house and the cold side outdoors, and the opposite in the summer. And so what's happening in your yard, you've got liquid piped underground in what we call a vertical bore closed loop system. That ground temperature is absorbing the Earth's constant temperature of 50 to 55 degrees. That's an average temperature all year round in the state of New York. That ground temperature is then transferred to refrigerant inside your heat pump, and it's either compressed or condensed to your desired indoor temperature. So this compressed and condensed refrigerant, this is what's better known as the refrigeration cycle. That's an age-old technology. It's been around for more than 100 years. It's the same technology that's used in your fridge in your kitchen, same technology that's used in your central AC. It's really not that different. And then that temperature-controlled warm or cool air is blown throughout the home via your ductwork. Super simple. And the results are cleaner, healthier, more comfortable air, and lower operating costs than a traditional fossil fuel burning system. That is like big picture geothermal. Happy to dive into the details of the technology with you folks anytime. I'm going to leave my contact info in the chat. We could set up a consultation. So from an environmental standpoint, by switching over from fossil fuel heating and central cooling to a geothermal heating and cooling ground source heat pump, you have an opportunity to reduce your home's CO2 output by up to 80% each year. For some homes, it's going to be the equivalent of removing 3.5 cars off the road every year for 25 years. The average home in the Northeast, according to NYSERDA, the average home in the Northeast that uses oil for heat contributes roughly 22,000 pounds of carbon a year into the atmosphere. One home, 1 year, 22,000 pounds of carbon. I mentioned earlier that the geothermal heat pumps that we install are going to last 25 years. And I mentioned that the ground loops are going to last 100 years, right? So if you currently use oil for heat and you switch over to geothermal heating and cooling, you could be personally responsible for ensuring that over 550,000 pounds of carbon are not released into the atmosphere over the lifespan of the first heat pump that you install. And one of the most amazing features of a geothermal heating and cooling system is the fact that you have an opportunity to take on a legacy project wherein your home is forever tied to geothermal. In which case, if you figure 550,000 pounds of carbon over the lifespan of one heat pump, and the ground loops are going to last over the lifespan of 4 heat pumps, 4 generations, 25 years each. Now you're talking about being personally responsible for ensuring that over 2.2 million pounds of carbon are not released into the atmosphere over the lifespan of those ground loops. It's hugely impactful. If you were to join the Dandelion movement, you could be part of an exclusive group of homeowners that are helping to offset over 100,000 tons of carbon since we launched in 2017. To put this type of carbon emission into sort of like a more palatable sort of example, someone who drives a Tesla, who removes gasoline guzzling car from the road, they would have to, in order to have the same impact as their neighbor who switched over to geothermal, that Tesla owner would have to buy a Tesla for themselves and 86 of their friends. So our process as a company in order to get geothermal into a homeowner's home is pretty simple, mostly virtual, 100% hassle-free. So we start off with a virtual consultation. Then if homeowners want to proceed with the next step after getting a quote during that consultation, we invite those homeowners to take some photos for us so that we can create a 3D scan of their building so that our design engineering team can start to do some heat loss and some heat load calculations for that homeowner's home specifically. After they take the photos, we present them with a final geothermal system design, and we present our homeowners with a sales agreement at that time. Once these homeowners sign their sales agreement, we then deploy a Dandelion site surveyor to their home for an in-person site survey. Once the site survey is done, we dot the I's and cross the T's from an engineering perspective, and then we start the ball rolling on the permitting process. In New York State, we are going, our actual timeline from final contract signing to installation complete can be as quick as 5 months and as long as roughly 12 months. So anywhere from 5 to 12 months from final contract signing to installation complete. It varies from region to region. I'm happy to meet with each and every one of you to talk about the impacts of our timelines and where that might fit in with your schedule. But I will tell you that basically right now, some of our regions in New York mean that if you were to engage with Dandelion today and sign a contract, say by the end of October, we'll hopefully have you up and running sometime midway through next heating season. So pricing is really tailored to each individual home, each individual property, and each individual system. Depending on who your electric provider is, you're going to have a whole bunch of money provided through the state of New York, through your electric provider that helps offset the cost of your geothermal system. Dandelion actually will float you that money from your electric provider that you're going to be getting at the end of your project. So your final system price that you sign up for with Dandelion includes your rebates that we're going to go out and get on your behalf after the job is done. Then the following year after geothermal is installed, your project is eligible for a 30% investment tax credit. This is the new tax credit that was rolled out as part of the Inflation Reduction Act that was recently signed into law. So for instance, if you paid $25,000 out of pocket for geothermal, you're going to be eligible to accrue about $7,500 back from the federal government the next year. So in that example, if you paid $25,000 in say 2023, and then you received a $7,500 tax credit in 2024 for the 23 tax year, you'd be looking at spending about $17,000 for a geothermal system. When we have a consultation with homeowners, we sort of will do what's called an initial drilling site plan together, where we indicate, you all still see my screen here with the picture of this property. So like we'll have sort of like, we have the house, and your energy consultant will say, okay, where's your septic tank? Where's your water well? Let's kind of talk about some specific stuff from an aerial view. Where's your drill going to go? And then where are we going to put your geothermal ground loops? This is all part of the process where we also uncover as much information as we can about your thermal envelope of the house and sort of what impacts you could expect for a geothermal system to actually be fully up and running. By the end of your initial consultation, a Dandelion energy consultant will offer you a rough quote for the project. We'll share with you operational cost savings, and then we'll also be able to dive into sort of your ROI, your financing options and everything, so that you can decide whether or not geothermal is the right path for you to take. If it is the right path, then we'll invite you to go through that design process that I mentioned a moment ago. So that's my spiel. I appreciate all y'all being here. I have my contact information here for you. I encourage you to reach out to me if you want to set up a consultation. I'll tell you that we are offering a $500 discount for NYSEC members as a thank you for having me here today and for taking the time to learn a little bit more about geothermal technology. And so with that, I will check out the chat here. How much time do I have, Haven?
Yeah, you actually are in great shape. You have another 5 minutes to your presentation time, and there are several messages in the chat that I think that you will want to take a look at.
Yep, I
Question
see
of
them.
ducts,
So-
cost,
Okay, so let me
condo
start.
buildings.
Right, so I'm going to start at the top. Can your heat pumps manage the heat necessary for homes with radiators, or does one still need to install ductwork? If you live on Long Island, we can install a geothermal ductless mini split system for you, only on Long Island. If you live in other parts of New York State or any of our other service territories for that matter, our geothermal systems do require ductwork. I will say each individual home is different, but if you currently have radiators in your house and you have an unfinished attic and an unfinished basement, Dandelion can install that ductwork for you. I live just outside of New Paltz, New York. I sold myself a geothermal system about 5 months after working for this company, and I replaced my oil-fired boiler, which was providing baseboard heat, to a geothermal forced heating and cooling system by way of ductwork that was installed by my company. Would just love to end by saying that was a thank you from Brittany. Doug, will your heat pump power natural gas with a cast iron radiators, no ductwork? Same answer. We don't use any natural gas. The goal is to get ductwork installed in your basement and your attic and hook up a forced air heating and cooling system to that ductwork so that we can accommodate the geothermal system. No need for natural gas or any fossil fuels when it comes to heating the home. What is the average ballpark cost for a medium-sized single-family home? That question is nuanced. I'd say our pricing starts at about $20,000 out of pocket, but it could be even less than that depending on who your electric provider is and depending on the layout of your home in particular. I don't mean to be coy with this answer, but it really is individual on a case-by-case basis. So Vincent, I would highly encourage you to reach out to me directly, and I'd love to kind of get some time to set up to see if your home's a good fit and give you a rough price. Can we drill through rocky soil? Absolutely. Dandelion loves bedrock. Our drills are, the reason why we love bedrock is rock is a conductive material. It's why we line our campfire with it, right? So the more shallow the bedrock, the more conductive your ground loops are. So yeah, rocky soil is not a problem for us. We have data around the whole country, specifically in New York State, and we can get very granular with our data as far as like, where is the water table? What's the soil type? How rocky is it? We determine all that during our design process so that we understand exactly how deep these geothermal boreholes have to go. Many mid-century homes in Ithaca have hot water boiler. Can heat ducting be installed in older homes? What cost might that be for a one-story house? Again, we can install ductwork in a home. I would say that our ductwork prices are going to start somewhere around $10,000 for ductwork installation in a one-story home. And that seems to be all of the questions in the chat. What's up, Haven?
There's one question that you didn't catch, which was, how would you deal with such an installation in a condo building that has 13 apartments / owners that are individually heated?
Yep. So that's a really great question. In general, I don't believe that we are able to install geothermal heating and cooling for an individual condo. And the reason why is the ground loops that we install. This is my best guess on this, okay? But this is a pretty educated guess, you guys. The ground loops and the trenching that we do in order to provide geothermal heating and cooling for a house, those go out in the yard. And the individual homeowners who sign up for geothermal, they own the ground loops and the trench. And there are particular setback requirements that are involved with this process, right? So we have to be like 10 feet from the property line, 25 feet from the foundation, and we have to steer clear of other underground utilities like buried water lines, buried sewer lines, et cetera. And so my best answer is, first of all, I know for a fact that Dandelion doesn't yet provide geothermal heating and cooling for individual condos, but I would say that any geothermal company would have a problem doing this, mostly because I don't know that individual condo owners have enough actual land that they own outside of their condo to accommodate the external geothermal system.
That said, if the entire condo association wanted to
Right.
install geothermal as an association, you could probably manage to figure that out. I'm guessing.
So
If there's sufficient space, and that leads also to one final question: how many feet down must the system go on average? So I'll leave you
That's
with
a
those
very
two
good
questions.
question. So I would say that for a whole condo, that's something that we would definitely be interested in understanding the size and scope of the work. So I wouldn't say, I'm certainly not in a position for the company to say, no, we wouldn't take that on. So if a whole condo association was like, hey, we want to switch over to heating and cooling, geothermal heating and cooling for the whole building, I'm sure we'd be willing to take a stab at it. When it comes to the actual drilling, a good rule of thumb is, so it's 120 feet of depth per ton of heat pump. And when I say ton, I mean BTUs, British thermal units, which is like a measure of air mass. So 1 ton is 12,000 BTUs. Our largest heat pump is a 6-ton unit. Any homes that require more than 6 tons are going to get 2 separate heat pumps. So let's say a 5-ton system is going to require about 600 feet of depth. The deepest borehole that we're allowed to drill, as per state regulations, is about 500 feet. So if you have a 5-ton heat pump that required 600 feet of depth, we would most likely install 2 boreholes that are each about 300 feet deep each.
That's awesome. So it's 11:49 and we scheduled this hour to end at 11:50. We can take a couple of questions if there's anyone else with a question. And you are free to raise your hand or type it into the chat. At 11:53 or 4, we will likely be ending this Zoom, and then you will all be going back to GatherTown. And there's a good question here. How would you heat hot water? The geothermal systems can do a preheating hot water tank, which Doug can explain to you. But let me just conclude with, why don't you go ahead and answer that question? When you X out of this Zoom, I just wanted to let everyone know who may be ending the Zoom now, all you need to do is navigate back to your GatherTown tab on your computer, whether it's a different window. If you're using the Zoom app, you can just quit Zoom, and then you'll be back in your browser and you can go back to your GatherTown tab. If you're using Zoom as a tab on your computer, you just need to close the tab that the Zoom is in and then return back to the GatherTown window where you were before. All right, so Doug, one last question and then we'll conclude the presentation Zoom.
Yep, geothermal systems can preheat your hot water. They still require a separate hot water tank. We have a couple of recommendations for how to get off of your fossil fuel burning hot water heater and how to switch over to something more efficient. That's something that we could dive into the details about during a consultation.
And I'll just make one final comment. Here in Hastings, we have community choice aggregation for our electrical bill, and our town decided to purchase green energy. So in full disclosure, I have a Dandelion geothermal system in my house, and we purchase green energy from the town's electrical system, so that I can say, not only is my geothermal system not burning fossil fuel, it's also generating its electricity, because you do need electricity to run the pumps, from green sources. If you have solar power panels on your roof and you're generating your own electricity, which we can't do because of siting issues, then you're really doing the right thing by the environment. So I'll leave it with that. All right, I want to thank everyone for coming today. If you have any further questions, you can find us in the GatherTown, check out the exhibition hall during off hours, and at noon, you can stay in the auditorium, hit your X on your keyboard, and you'll join our opening plenary. And we have the distinction of having the Commissioner of DEC speak with us this afternoon, which is very exciting. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, Haven. Great
Thank
job.
you, Haven.
Bye.